The silence of the Zovian survey ship was a physical thing, a thick blanket that had pressed down on Kalon for most of his adult life. It was the silence of empty stars and dead worlds, the expected result of a galaxy where the Zovian hegemony was, as far as anyone knew, the only light of sentient life. Kalon, a xenobiologist, had dedicated his career to studying this beautiful, lonely emptiness. But in his heart, buried under layers of scientific training, a small, stubborn hope always flickered. What if they were wrong? That hope became a physical tremor in his hands when the long-range scanners pinged with an anomaly. A star system, shrouded in unusual cosmic dust, showed a thermal and atmospheric signature that made no sense. The third planet glowed with the precise energy patterns of a managed biosphere. It was not natural. It was made. The command deck buzzed with a tension Kalon had never felt. His team, a group of the hegemony's best scientists, moved with quiet urgency. Probe data streamed in, each piece more incredible than the last. Artificial structures, regulated climate patterns, photosynthetic cycles that were too perfect. "It's a colony," someone whispered, the words sounding sacred and dangerous in the quiet room. Kalon felt his breath catch. The hegemony's philosophy was one of peaceful stewardship. They had long believed other species might have risen and fallen before them, leaving only ruins. To find one alive, it was the dream of 1,000 generations. "Prepare the landing craft," the mission commander said, her voice tight with emotion. "Full first contact protocols. No weapons. Only curiosity." Kalon was chosen to lead the surface team. As the small craft detached from the mothership and fell towards the blue and green marble below, he stared at the viewport. Cities were visible now, not sprawling megacities, but clusters of elegant, low structures woven into valleys and along coastlines. There were lights in the darkness on the planet's night side. Someone was home. Their landing zone was a grassy plain near one of the larger settlements. The air outside, when the hatch opened, was the biggest shock. It was not the sterile, processed air of his ship. It was wild, rich, and complex. It smelled of growing things, of soil, of water, and underneath it all, something alien and sweet. His instruments confirmed it was breathable, a masterpiece of environmental engineering. They did not have to wait long. From the tree line at the edge of the plain, figures emerged. They walked on two legs, were bipedal and vaguely Zovian in basic shape, but smaller, with smoother skin and a fascinating variety of dark hair on their heads. They wore simple, practical clothes in colors of brown and green. Kalon raised his primary limb, the universal hegemony gesture for peaceful intent. His team did the same. The lead human, a person with a serious but calm face, mirrored the gesture after a brief moment. Communication was the next challenge. The humans spoke to each other in a fluid, melodic language. Kalon's translator device spun, searching for any reference. It found ancient, fragmented archives. It is a derivative of a pre-extinction Earth language called Korean. His linguists subvocalized through the calm. "The database is minimal. We can learn, but it will be slow." The lead human seemed to understand the problem. She pointed to herself. "Zoom in," she said, clearly and slowly. Kalon pointed to himself. "Kalon." A wave of relief seemed to pass through the human group. Sumin smiled, a warm expression that reached her eyes. She gestured towards the settlement in the distance, then back to Kalon and his team, and made a walking motion with her fingers. The invitation was clear. The walk to the settlement, which the humans called Hope's Resolve, was a journey through a living museum of survival. The fields they passed were not just orderly. They were vibrant tapestries of food plants Kalon had never seen, arranged with artistic care. Water channels glittered in the sunlight. The humans they passed stopped their work and watched, not with fear, Kalon thought, but with a deep, intense curiosity that mirrored his own. The settlement itself was beautiful in its simplicity. Buildings were made of local stone and engineered wood, with roofs that curved gently. Solar collectors were everywhere, but so were living green walls of plants. Children peeked from behind doorways, their eyes wide. Kalon's heart swelled. Children, a species that not only survived, but nurtured its young. This was the hope he had carried. Sumin led them to a central, open plaza. Other humans arrived, including a tall, quiet man introduced as Hyan, and a gentle-faced man named Jean. Through gestures, simple words, and the slowly improving translator, a basic story emerged. They were from Earth. They came here long ago. They wanted to live in peace, to grow. As the local sun began to set, painting the sky in colors of orange and purple, Kalon stood in the plaza. He watched a group of human children playing a quiet game with stones. He smelled the scent of cooking food, something earthy and rich wafting from the homes. He listened to the hum of a thriving community. He turned to his second-in-command, his voice full of awe. "Do you see it? They did it. They left their home, found a new one, and built this. Without conflict, without destroying their world. They are everything we hoped might exist." He looked at the humble, strong buildings of Hope's resolve, and in that moment, the galaxy felt less empty, felt full of promise. The great silence was finally, beautifully, broken. The next few days were a blur of wonder for Kalon. He and his team were given a clean, simple building near the plaza to use as their base. The humans of Hope's resolve were not just peaceful. They were generous with their time and their world. Sumin became their main guide. She showed them the water reclamation systems, a network of clever filters and algae tanks that made every drop of rain or moisture work 10 times over. She explained the seasonal crops in the fields, pointing out plants engineered for maximum nutrition with minimal water. Kalon took notes, his scientific mind thrilled by the elegant solutions. He met Jean properly in the colony's archive. It was not a digital database as Kalon expected, but a room full of real, physical books made of a sturdy plant fiber paper and carefully carved data slates. Jean was a quiet man with kind eyes. He handled the books with a tenderness that was almost religious. "History is our anchor," Jean said, his words translated by the small device on Kalon's wrist. The translator was learning fast, piecing together the human language from daily conversations. "We teach the past to guide the future." Jean showed him logs. They spoke of the great journey, a long and difficult trip across the stars. They spoke of the first planting and the building of the resolve. The records were poetic, full of hope and collective effort. They spoke of unity as their highest law. "It is beautiful," Kalon said, running a careful limb over the handwritten words. "You have kept your story alive." Jean smiled, but it did not quite reach his eyes. "Some stories are heavier than others. We keep the most important ones close." Kalon was too excited to dwell on the strange comment. Everything he saw reinforced his first feeling. This was a miracle. The humans worked together without visible conflict. They shared food and tools. They sang together in the evenings, soft songs that echoed in the plaza. But slowly, small things began to press at the edges of his joy. The first was the children. He saw them, but only in certain age groups. There were young children, and there were older teenagers working alongside adults. But he realized he never saw any human that looked to be in the awkward stage between what his archives said human children called middle school age. He mentioned it to Sumin as they walked past a learning hall. "The colony cycles," she said simply. "Education is intensive and grouped. You are likely seeing one cohort at rest. Another is in deep study." Her answer was smooth, but she quickly pointed out a new type of fruit tree, changing the subject. The second thing was Hyan. The security chief was always there, a quiet shadow. He never interfered, but his eyes missed nothing. He watched the Zovians handle tools. He watched their instruments. He watched how they moved. It was not hostile, but it was deeply cautious in a colony that otherwise seemed open. The third and biggest thing was the off-limits structure. On the second day, Kalon had seen it from a distance. A smooth, metallic monument on a northern bluff, separate from the organic flow of the settlement. It caught the sun in a way the stone and wood buildings did not. "What is that?" he had asked, pointing. Sumin's friendly demeanor cooled by a few degrees. "That is the vault. It is a private place. For remembrance. It is not for visitors." The finality in her voice was absolute. Kalon's scientific curiosity itched, but he respected the boundary. He had his team do a general geological scan from orbit instead. The results were puzzling. The planet's crust showed deep, old scarring, consistent with a massive asteroid impact or a series of powerful tectonic events hundreds of thousands of years ago. But the scans also showed newer, stranger patterns. The repairs to the ecosystem were too perfect, too fast. It was as if the terraforming hadn't just encouraged life, but had forcibly stitched the planet's wounds closed on a massive scale. The energy signature required would have been staggering. That evening, Kalon sat with his team in their base. The scent of the humans' evening meal, a spiced grain dish they had shared, still hung in the air. "They are hiding something," one of his scouts said. "The energy readings from the subsurface near that vault are odd. Shielded. Not like their surface tech. It's more advanced. Denser. It could be a power source from their ship," Kalon argued, his hope making him defensive. "Buried for safety. Not everything is a secret. Their culture values privacy. We must respect that. But the lack of certain children, the way they avoid talking about Earth itself, they talk about the journey but never the reason for it." The scout pressed. Kalon looked out the window. In the plaza, a group of humans was laughing together, sharing a story. The scene was so peaceful, so perfect. "Every culture has its traumas," Kalon said, more to himself. "A journey across space, leaving your homeworld forever. That would scar any species. Perhaps their secrecy is just pain. We are guests. We will observe, learn, and offer our friendship. That is why we are here." He believed his own words. He looked at the warm lights in the windows of Hope's Resolve, a beacon against the quiet night. He pushed the inconsistencies to the back of his mind. The universe had given him a gift of living companions. He would not spoil it with suspicion. The hope was too bright, too precious to doubt. The human named Mira was different. She was young, a botanist working in the airy greenhouses on the settlement's east side. Where Sumin was calmly professional and Hyan was quietly watchful, Myra's curiosity burned with a bright, almost desperate energy. She found Kalon examining a hybrid fruit vine, its purple leaves a genetic marvel. "You are from the stars?" she asked, her words translated with a slight delay. "Yes," Kalon replied, making a gesture that his translator said meant a friendly greeting. "Many stars away." Myra's eyes were wide. "And is it all empty? Are you the only ones?" Her question struck at the core of Kalon's old loneliness. "We thought we were, until we found you. You have given us a great gift." For a moment, her youthful face clouded. "A gift, yes." She touched the leaf of the vine with a tenderness that reminded him of Jean with his books. "We work hard to make life grow here. It is the most important work." Kalon's team continued their studies, and the cracks Sumin tried to plaster over began to widen. The cultural exchange was a dance, and the humans were careful partners, always leading Kalon away from certain topics. When Kalon asked Jean about Earth animals, the archivist only showed him drawings of gentle creatures: deer, birds, rabbits. "These we remember," Jean said softly. When Kalon, using his own archives, asked about predators like lions or wolves, Jin's face went still. "Some memories are too sharp to keep. They are lost." The food was another puzzle. The humans shared their meals generously: flavorful stews of vegetables and grains, protein-rich fungal cakes, sweet fruits. It was all delicious and nutritious. But Kalon's bioscanner, designed to analyze alien ecosystems, gave quiet, confusing readings on the protein sources. The molecular structure was complex, highly engineered, and it contained markers that were strangely familiar. His scanner had a baseline for human DNA, taken from harmless shed skin cells. The protein shared key markers. It was not a plant mimicking meat. It was something else, built from a foundational blueprint that was inherently human. He pushed the result aside, thinking it was an error. His hope was like a fragile glass sculpture in his mind, and these inconsistencies were stones threatening to shatter it. The biggest stone came from the off-limits bluff. His scouts' readings were correct. Using a deep-ground penetrating scanner from orbit, a passive tool that did not send active pings, they mapped the area around the vault. Below the surface, extending down hundreds of meters, was a labyrinth of structures. The energy signatures were old, but immensely powerful. They did not match the clean solar angiothermal signatures of Hope's resolve. This was older, denser technology. Warp core level power. Weapons-grade shielding. Kalon decided on a direct, but polite approach. He found Su-min and Hyan together near the water filtration plant. "Your colony is a wonder," he began, his translator conveying his respectful tone. "Your harmony with this world is perfect, but my science, it has questions. The geological repairs on this planet, they are very advanced, more advanced than your current tools suggest. And the structure on the bluff, there is significant technology below it. May we understand its purpose? It could help us learn about your great journey." The change in the air was instant. The pleasant hum of the nearby machinery seemed to grow louder. Su-min's friendly calm hardened into something like polished stone. Hyan took a small step forward, his usual watchfulness sharpening into a clear, physical warning. "The vault is where we keep our past," Su-min said, each word precise and cold. "Not all past is for sharing. The technology there is from our ship. It is dormant. It is dangerous. It is not for study. The scans indicate—" Kalon started. Hyan interrupted, his voice low and final. "The scans are a guest overstepping." He used a word the translator struggled with. It meant a breach of sacred trust. "You study life. Study our greenhouses. Study our water. The vault is not life. It is a tomb for what we had to leave behind." Kalon felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The metaphor of a tomb was clear, but tombs, in his experience, held bodies and secrets. What bodies? What secrets were so terrible that this peaceful colony would guard them with such quiet threat? He backed down, raising his primary limb in a gesture of peace. "I apologize. I did not wish to cause offense. My curiosity is only scientific." Su-min's posture relaxed slightly, but the warmth did not return to her eyes. "Science is a tool. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. We have learned that lesson. We hope you do not have to learn it the hard way." That night, in his quarters, Kalon looked at the data. The anomalous protein, the missing middle children, the repaired planet, the buried technology, the fear behind Jin's eyes when asked about Earth's predators, the weight in Hyan's warning. They were not pieces of a peaceful settlement. They were pieces of something else, a puzzle picture he could not yet see. His hope was still there, but it was now ringed by a wall of dread. The humans were not just hiding a private grief. They were guarding a truth, and the ferocity with which they guarded it told him one thing for certain. Whatever was in that vault or buried beneath it was not just a memory that it was a live wound, and they were desperately afraid of it being reopened. The air in Hope's resolve changed after Kalon's question about the vault. The smiles from the humans were still there, but they felt more careful, like a painted curtain. Kalon and his team were still welcome to walk the gardens and see the greenhouses, but a quiet distance was kept. Hyan was always visible now, a silent guardian watching from the edges. Kalon ordered his team to pull back, to focus only on public, agreed-upon studies. He wanted to rebuild the broken trust. But the mystery was a poison in his mind. He could not stop thinking about the puzzle pieces. The key, he felt, was not in the forbidden vault, but in the life of the colony itself. The answer was in their survival. So he focused on the most basic thing, food. He requested a full tour of their agricultural and protein synthesis systems. Su-min, after a long pause, agreed. She showed them the vast fungal vats, where carefully engineered organisms grew in dark, warm rooms, producing dense protein cakes. "It is efficient," Su-min explained, her voice flat. "It uses minimal water and land. It was a key to our survival in the early years." Kalon nodded, his scientific eye taking in the setup. It was advanced, but it matched the colony's level of technology. But his scanner, hidden in a pack on his limb, told a different story. It was not a lie detector, but a molecular analyzer. And as they passed a processing area where the fungal cakes were packaged, his scanner brushed against a freshly cut sample. The readout flashed on a tiny screen only he could see. The analysis was deep past the primary structure. It looked for genetic markers, the fingerprints of the original source material. There it was, unmistakable. Interwoven with the fungal DNA were specific, complex nucleotide sequences. They were not from any local plant or engineered microbe. They were human haplogroup markers. It was a trace, a ghost in the machine. The protein was built using a human genetic template. A cold understanding washed over Kalon. It was not cannibalism. That was a savage, simple act. This was something else. This was systematic, respectful, and horrifyingly efficient. They were not eating their dead in a crisis. They were recycling them with solemn precision into the building blocks of continued life. The missing children, the lack of a middle age group, a grim calculation began to form in his mind. The colony's population was perfectly stable, too stable. It was managed. He felt sick. The warm, fragrant air of the growing rooms suddenly felt thick and suffocating. He looked at Sumin, who was pointing out a temperature control system. Her face was calm, professional. Did she know what the substance she helped produce truly contained? Of course she did. She was the lead engineer. This was the unspoken heart of their miracle. He needed air. He mumbled an excuse about checking on another team member and stepped outside the low building. He leaned against the sun-warmed stone, trying to steady his breathing nearby. In a smaller, experimental garden, he saw Mira. The young botanist was kneeling in the soil, gently tying a vine to a support. She was singing a quiet, sad song to the plant. Kalon's translator caught fragments. "Grow strong, remember the sun." The choice they made. He walked over slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Your plants are very healthy," he said. Mira looked up, her eyes red-rimmed as if she had been crying. She forced a smile. "They have to be. Every life here is precious. We cannot waste a single one." Her words, innocent and sincere, felt like a knife twisted in his new knowledge. "Mira," he said gently, crouching down to her level. "You spoke of the choice before. What choice?" Her face instantly paled. The sadness in her eyes was replaced by fear. She looked past him, and Kalon turned to see Sumin standing in the doorway of the protein facility, her expression stormy. "Mira," Sumin's voice was sharp, a command. "The council needs your yield report. Now." Mira scrambled to her feet, wiping her hands on her pants. She gave Kalon one last, terrified glance, then hurried away without a word. Sumin walked over. The friendly guide was gone. In her place was a leader, hard and resolute. "You are looking in places you should not, Kalon," she said. Her voice was low, without its usual translator-assisted calm. He understood her tone perfectly. "You are hiding the truth of your survival," Kalon replied, standing to face her. "The protein, it is not just fungus." Sumin's jaw tightened. "It is life. It is what allows us to live. You, from your rich ship, from your peaceful galaxy, you judge? You have never had to choose. You have never had to look at your children and know there is not enough food, not enough air, not enough future unless you make the hardest calculation imaginable." "So it is true," Kalon whispered, the last of his hope crumbling. "What is true?" Sumin said, stepping closer. "Is that we survived. We made a covenant with our dead and with our unborn. We honor them with every breath we take, with every bite we eat. Their energy returns to the colony. It is not a horror. It is a promise to keep living." She stared at him, her eyes blazing with a pain and a pride so deep it was frightening. "This is our price. This is the secret of our peace. Your hope, Zovian, is built on a foundation of our dread. Now you know a piece of it. I suggest you learn to live with it or leave." She turned and walked back toward the settlement, leaving Kalon alone in the garden. He looked at the vibrant green plants, at the carefully tended soil. He thought of the protein cakes, the solemn faces at mealtime, the missing children. The colony was not just built on cooperation. It was built on a silent, terrible sacrifice, repeated over generations. The beautiful harmony had a cost, and the cost was woven into the very flesh and bone of every person here. The dread was no longer a feeling. It was a fact, and it was growing. The fragile peace was broken. Kalon shared his terrible discovery with his team. The mood aboard their lander shifted from wonder to a tense, quiet horror. They had come looking for brothers in the cosmos and found something they could not understand. The Zovians debated leaving. The mission commander on the mothership urged caution. But for Kalon, the scientist, it was no longer enough. The partial truth from Sumin was worse than not knowing. It painted a picture of sad necessity, but the puzzle was still incomplete. Where did the hard choice really begin? What catastrophe demanded such a permanent, gruesome solution? He believed the full answer was in the vault. His orders were to observe, but another on his team, a scout named Tail, had different instincts. Tail was younger, driven by a mix of fear and a soldier's need to know threats. He saw the colony's secret not as a tragedy, but as a potential danger. If they can do that to themselves, what might they do to us if they feel threatened? Tail argued in the privacy of their base. Their leader threatened you. We need to know what else is in that tomb. Kalon forbade any action. It was a direct order. But that night, under the cover of a sudden, misting rain that muffled sound and blurred lights, Tail acted alone. Using a personal stealth field and bypass protocols designed for delicate mineral sampling, he slipped out of the settlement. The rain made the grassy bluff slippery. The smooth metal of the vault was cold and beaded with water. There was no visible door, no control panel. But Tail's scanner, tuned to the energy signatures Kalon had mapped, found a weak point, a nearly invisible seam in the metal, a service access for the systems below. It was not meant to keep out someone with advanced tools. It was meant to be respected. With a low hum, his cutter breached the seal. A puff of stale, cool air whispered out. Inside was darkness, lit only by the dim, pulsing glow of standby lights along a narrow ramp leading down. The silence was absolute. He descended. The structure was not a simple memorial. It was a fortress buried in the hill. The walls changed from human-made metal to a different, darker alloy, covered in faint geometric scarring. Battle damage. The ramp opened into a vast, cold chamber. Tail's light swept across rows and rows of upright pods, transparent covers frosted with age. Cryostasis pods. Hundreds, perhaps thousands. Most were dark, their internal lights dead, their occupants long gone to dust. But at the chamber's heart, a small cluster glowed with a soft blue light. Inside, Tail could see the withered, peaceful faces of the very old, their lives suspended at the very edge of the end. This was the colony's true elderly care. Not a quiet death, but a frozen, waiting stillness. But this was not the source of the power readings. At the far end of the chamber was a sealed doorway, made of that same dark, scarred alloy. A control console beside it was dead. Tail used his cutter again, the process slower, harder. This metal was tougher, foreign. The door slid open with a groan of protest. The room beyond was not human. The technology was angular, brutalist, lit by a harsh red emergency light. A central console, damaged but partially active, surrounded a large, cracked viewport. This was not from the human colony ship. This was a bridge. A warship's bridge, buried in the earth. Tail's hands trembled as he approached the console. The script was not human, but his scanner had a universal linguistic decoder. It began to translate fragments from the active memory bank's .log entry. Final pursuit. Target. Colony vessel Dawn Runner. Orders. Terminate. Earth remnants must not survive. Weapons online. Planetary bombardment initiated. Then, a human file captured and stored in the enemy database. A video log. It flickered to life on the broken screen. A human face, smudged with dirt and blood, filled the view. A man, not Gene or Hyan, but with the same determined eyes. His voice was raw with static and despair. They followed us. The war didn't end on Earth. It followed us here. They're in orbit. They're bombing the planet to ash. We have maybe one shot. We captured their landing craft. We have their commander. We think we can use his ship's core, overload it, create a pulse. It might fry their systems in low orbit. But the feedback, it'll scald this world clean. It will kill everything on the surface. Everything. The man swallowed hard, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. We have to get to the bunkers, the deep vaults. We have the children. We have the genetic archives. But everyone on the surface, and the core blast, it will make the land sick for centuries. We're saving a future we will never see. This is the last log of the free human colony, New Dawn. To anyone who finds this, we did not start this fight, but we will finish it. For our children. Make the choice worth it. The video ended. Tail stood in the silent, red-lit tomb of two dead ships. His mind reeled. This was not just a story of hard survival. It was a story of a war that crossed the stars. The cataclysm that scarred the planet was not an accident. It was a final, suicidal act of defense. The humans had not just terraformed a dead world. They had healed a world they themselves had burned to stop their enemies. The choice was not just about recycling the dead. It was about the survivors emerging from their bunkers into a radioactive hellscape, with no food, no tools, and only the brutal, salvage technology of their enemies to rebuild. The Covenant began not in sorrow, but in the ashes of a cosmic victory that felt like annihilation. He heard a noise above. A shout. The sound of running feet. The humans knew he was here. Tail turned to run, but his light caught one final thing on the console. A small, hand-carved human symbol, placed there like an offering on an altar. It was a word in their script. His translator rendered it. Remembered that he fled up the ramp as the first humans, led by a furious hyena, poured into the vault above. Kalon sat in the quiet room for a long time after the humans left. The words echoed in his mind. What will you do with it? He thought of the Zovian hegemony, a civilization built on the calm certainty that they were alone, and that this loneliness was a peaceful thing. They studied stars and wrote poems about the quiet beauty of an empty universe. Their greatest fear was not monsters, but the gentle melancholy of solitude. Now he had to return to them and say the universe was not empty. And the life they had found was not a gentle answer to their loneliness, but a terrifying question. Humanity was not a mirror to Zovian ideals. It was a dark prism, breaking their simple light into frightening colors. The next morning, under a gray sky, the Zovians prepared to leave. Their landing craft stood in the same grassy field where they had first arrived, but everything was different now. The air no longer smelled of promise. It smelled of damp earth and unspoken truths. The humans gathered to see them off. It was not the warm crowd of the first days. It was a solemn assembly. Sumin, Hyan, and Jean stood at the front. Mira was there too, her eyes on the ground. Kalon walked over to them one last time. He looked at their faces, these people who had welcomed him, who had built a world from ash and sacrifice. He no longer saw just gardeners. He saw soldiers standing guard over a hard-won peace. He saw historians keeping a ledger of unbearable costs. He saw engineers who knew every gram of their survival was bought with a gram of their past. "We will leave," Kalon said, "and we will tell our people what we have seen." Hyan's body tensed, a coiled spring. Sumin placed a calming hand on his arm. She looked at Kalon, waiting. "We will tell them of a species that fought a war so terrible it chased them across the stars," Kalon continued, his voice steady. "We will tell them of a people who, when faced with total death, made a choice of impossible weight to live. We will tell them of the discipline it takes to turn weapons into water and grief into grain. We will tell them you are here, and that you remember." Jin's eyes softened. Sumin gave a slow, single nod. It was not thanks. It was acknowledgement. "You carry our story now," Jin said. "Tell it carefully. Some who hear it will only see the monster. They will not see the cradle we built around it to keep it sleeping." Kalon boarded the craft. The hatch closed with a final sound. As the engines whined to life, he looked out the viewport. The humans stood together, a small, determined cluster against the green of their hard-made world. He saw Mira lift her head and look directly at the ship, her young face filled with a sadness too old for her years. The ship rose into the sky. Hope's resolve shrank below, no longer a beacon, but a fragile outpost clinging to a healed scar. Kalon watched until the planet itself was just a blue-green sphere, hanging in the black. His second-in-command approached. "What is in our official report, sir?" Kalon thought of the silent vault, the cryopods, the scorched bridge of an enemy ship. He thought of the peaceful plaza and the singing and the protein cakes. He thought of the dread, heavy and cold, now sitting in his own stomach. It was the dread of knowledge, the dread of complexity, the dread that peace might not be a natural state, but a rare and difficult victory, always one generation away from ruin. "We will report the truth," Kalon said finally, still staring at the stars. "But we must explain the context. We came looking for hope and found something stronger, something real. They are not what we hoped for. They are what is. They are survivors. And the universe, it seems, is a place that requires survival." The ship jumped to warp, and the planet vanished on the surface. Sumin watched the last shimmer of light fade into the daytime sky. The weight of the secret was now shared. It was a relief and a new fear. "Do you think they will come back?" Hyan asked, his voice low. "I do not know," Sumin said, "but we will be here. We will tend the gardens. We will honor the covenant. We will remember." She turned and walked back toward the settlement, to the work of living, to the daily, quiet practice of keeping the monsters at bay in the vast, silent dark of space. Kalon's ship traveled on. The great loneliness had been filled, not with the comforting answer the Zovians had longed for, but with a difficult and terrifying question. The hope he had carried was gone, replaced by a profound and sobering understanding. The galaxy was not empty. It was just waiting. And what waited in it was not simple, was not safe, and was nothing like a dream. It was real. And real things, he now knew, could break your heart with their beauty and freeze your blood with their cost. Kalon knew something was wrong when he heard the shouts in the night. He ran from his quarters into the central plaza. The soft rain had stopped, leaving the stones slick and shining under the moons. A group of humans, armed with tools and stern faces, moved with purpose toward the northern bluff. At their front was Hyan, his expression like carved stone. Moments later, two of Hyan's people escorted a shaken tail into the plaza. The scout's stealth gear was deactivated, and he looked pale. Behind them came Sumin and Jin. Jin's face held a deep sadness. Sumin's was cold with a resolved fury. "Your scout," Hyan said, his voice cutting through the quiet night, "has broken our most sacred trust. He has entered the vault." Kalon felt a failure so deep it was physical. "I did not order this. Your presence allowed it," Sumin said. "You brought your doubt into our home, and it crawled into our heart." The hope Kalon had arrived with was gone. Only a heavy, dreadful clarity remained. He looked from Tail's guilty face to the grim humans surrounding them. "He told me what he saw. The warship. The log. Is it true?" Sumin and Hyan exchanged a long look. The anger seemed to drain from Sumin, replaced by a profound exhaustion. The performance was over. The truth was out. "Come," Jean said softly. "You have seen the wound. You should understand the scar." They did not go to the vault's main entrance. Instead, Hyan led them to a smaller, hidden door at the base of the hill, behind a screen of engineered vines. It opened into a clean, bright room within the structure, a room meant for the living. The walls were lined with data slates and simple benches. Sumin gestured for Kalon to sit. She remained standing, a leader giving a report on a disaster. "You know the what," she began. "Now you will know the why. Earth did not grow old and die. It murdered itself. Two factions. One believed in expansion, in taking what was needed. We were the other. We believed in balance, in limits. We lost. We were not soldiers. We were gardeners, engineers, teachers. We ran with what we could save. The Dawn Runner was our lifeboat. Jean activated a viewer. It showed the stolen enemy recording Tail had found. They watched the desperate man give his final log. They watched the static take him. They followed us, Hyan said, his arms crossed. They called it a mop-up operation. To them, we were weeds to be pulled. They bombarded the planet from orbit. They were going to leave nothing alive. So we used their own weapon against them. We turned this valley into a trap and a bomb. The viewer changed to show geological scans. It showed the terrifying pulse of energy, the shockwave that scorched the atmosphere, the electromagnetic killshot that neutralized the enemy ships in orbit at the cost of frying the surface. The survivors, Sumin continued, her voice flat, emerged from deep bunkers 1 year later, into a silent, scorched world. The soil was poison. The water was poison. Our ship was wreckage. Theirs, she pointed downward, toward the buried bridge, was our only prize. Its core was broken, but its databases held technology. Terraforming technology. Weapons turned to tools. We used it to force the land to heal, 100 times faster than nature. Kalon understood. The perfect repairs. The advanced signatures. It was war tech. But the cost? Jean whispered. Of the 12,000 who entered the bunkers, 2,000 lived. We had food for 6 months. We had the genetic banks to grow more, but it would take years we did not have. Sumin looked directly at Kalon. That was the choice. Do we all die slowly, watching the children starve first? Or do we make a new law? Every life in its end sustains the whole. The body is not a tomb. It is a resource, a gift. The elderly entered final stasis, to be honored. Those who died of the poison, their gift was purified and used. We built the covenant. 1 generation would sacrifice so the next could plant a single seed. We learned to live with the dread so our children might live with hope. The room was silent. Kalon saw it all now. The missing middle generation, they were the first children, the ones who had to be sustained through the worst famine by the first terrible sacrifices. Their population was stable because it was meticulously, heartbreakingly managed. You are not a peaceful colony, Kalon said, the words hollow. You are the survivors of a war. You are soldiers who used the guns of your enemies to build a garden. Hyan's eyes were hard. We are what remains when peace is no longer an option. Our harmony is not a gift. It is a discipline. It is the wall we built to keep the monsters out. He paused. And the monsters in. Kalon finally understood the depth of their fear. It wasn't fear of him. It was fear of what his discovery meant. If their secret got out, they would not be seen as hopeful pioneers. They would be seen as what they were. A species capable of apocalyptic war, who then made a peace built on a horror. They were afraid the galaxy would look at them and see only the monstrous, and never the miraculous survival. You have your truth, Zovian, Sumin said, her energy spent. Your hope is broken. Now you carry our dread. What will you do with it?